Something that board game enthusiasts love to talk about is their grail game, a game that they just can't find, most likely because it's out of print. It goes for crazy prices on eBay. Well, one of my grail games has come back into print after being gone for years. So my review game today is my grail game, Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl is a sports miniatures game, very much like football with medieval fantasy players. You've got a human team and an orc team, with more teams to come in the future. The goal of the game is to be the team who scores the most touchdowns by the end of the second half. Each team has 11 players on the field, and on your turn, each one of those players has the opportunity to take a single action. They can move downfield, pass or hand off the ball, or attempt to knock down other players by blocking. These actions are done by using each player's individual statistics. You can move a number of spaces equal to your movement allowance. If you ever move through an opposing player's tackle zone, you must make an agility roll to keep from being knocked down. You can pass the ball by using the range ruler to determine the difficulty of the pass. Then, using your agility stat, roll the dice to see if the pass is good. The catcher will also have to make an agility test to catch the ball. But beware, an opposing player in between can attempt an interception. You tackle other players by comparing your strength to your opponent's strength, taking into account any adjacent blocking or defending assist, and rolling the blocking dice. The opposing player could be pushed, knocked down, or you could fail the attempt and be knocked down yourself. When a player is knocked down, he'll have to roll using his armor value to see if he's injured. When injured, a player needs to consult the injury table. Players can be stunned, taken off the field to the injury box to return later, or outright killed and out of the game forever. Though all your players on the field have the opportunity to take an action, if any of them are knocked down, fail to pick up or catch the ball, or any other mishap befalls them, you will cause a turnover, ending your turn prematurely. At the end of the second half, the player with the most touchdowns will be the winner. Now, I have to start off my review by saying that I already like Blood Bowl. I've loved Blood Bowl for years. I've played it tons of times. I've played it the video game version. I've played it on the table with third-party proxy miniatures that I've put together. And I already like the game. So that's a little problematic for a review because you already know that I'm going to like the game. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to be unbiased with some of these rules because there is some weird things that you have to know about going into Blood Bowl, seeing that this is an old rule set. They did not update the game at all. This is the older version of Blood Bowl that was out 10, 15 years ago. So it kind of shows that age. All right, so first I'm going to talk about the components because let's just get that out of the way. It's Games Workshop. Games Workshop components are always top-notch. The miniatures are fantastic. And what's great about them is that not only are the sculpts beautiful, the plastic is high quality, but they've catered to board gamers here because this really is a board game. It's not a miniatures game. It's just a board game with miniatures in it. So they're going towards the board game market with this one because there isn't a lot of assembly involved in this game. It's very easy. You snip them off of the sprues and you put them together because they have this thing called push fit. Push fit, you just assemble them. You don't even need to glue them. The entire overview that I shot, none of those miniatures are glued together. I just put them together and they work fine. Maybe one arm fell off here and there. So it's probably a good idea to glue them, but you don't have to. And I think that's terrific what they did here. So it's very easy to get into if you're not interested in the hobby aspect. So don't even be scared about that. Now, otherwise the components, the board, it's double-sided. You got a human pitch. On the other side, you got an orc pitch. One of them's all pretty green grass, and the other side is just dirt and rocks, and it's ugly. And I think that's great. They didn't have to do that because it doesn't really change the game at all. It's the same thing, but it's cool from a thematic standpoint. It's nice that they did that, and I really like it. The templates are beautiful, and now the game has cards. Years ago, you had to look in the rule book to find all the stats for all your players, your catcher, your linemen, your blitzers, your throwers, and all that stuff. You had to look in the book for that stuff. Now they give you cards. So it's really easy to get to. Also, all of the tables that you have to look up, you have the injury table, the kickoff table, the weather table, all of that stuff is on this nice player aid that's card stock. You just put it out and you have it instead of flipping through a rule book. So everything about this production is much better than it was before. All right, so let's talk about these mechanics in this game. It is an old rule set. It's the same rule set that's been around for a decade.
And the reason that they did that was because old school Blood Bowl players really don't want a new streamlined edition. They want this game. And I think that's great that they cater to those players, but I think it's going to be difficult for newer players to get into it. These newer players that came into the board gaming world where everything is streamlined, design has progressed, and this does feel a little old. But I think if you give it a chance, you're really going to dig what you find. Now, mostly, the game is very random. And that's the initial thing that you're going to think going in. It's a lot of dice rolling. If you run up to the ball and it's laying on the pitch, you have to make an agility check to see if you pick it up. And if you fail that agility check, you don't. You fumble it and your turn is over because you just created a turnover. This is the thing that a lot of people complain about, the turnover. You could essentially move a character one space, try to pick up the ball, fail, and your turn is over. That's all you did on your turn. And that could be really punishing for you because the other player gets a whole turn after that. They got the turn before, they got the turn after. You did one thing and failed, and then now it's their turn again. And that sounds very scary. But here's what's good about that. Because, and this may sound a little strange, but I look at this game, and when I'm playing it, I almost feel like I'm playing a game of chess. I get the same feelings, the same juices are flowing in my brain as when I'm playing a game of chess. Because you've got 11 players on that board. And each one of them has a role to fill. And you have to gauge the value of each one of their actions on the table and decide at which order that you're going to do them. Because some of them may have a low probability of failure. Sometimes you want to get that over with first, right? So the low probability of error things go, and then you can get to the things that are much harder to do. But sometimes those hard things are way more important than all of those low probability things earlier in the turn. So you have to chance it and do the hard thing first. So it's all about playing the probabilities in this game, the probabilities of success of doing everything. And then also positioning your players on the team to increase the probabilities of your success in each one of those actions. And this is what the game is. It's not about perfect information. The randomness is very important in this game to bring out the strategy of really what the spirit of this game is. It's a beautiful thing if you get over that hump of it initially being difficult to handle all of that randomness, to handle the injury table of the first person that falls down on the table. You could roll the injury table and he could be dead and he's out of the game. And now for the rest of that game, you have 10 players to that other guy's 11 players. And that could happen to you over and over and over again if you're unlucky. I think that just something about that is scary to a new player, but if you're used to it and been playing Blood Bowl for years, it's so charming. And those things are things you have to overcome in the game. And I think that's one of the things that makes it great, is when you figure out how to overcome those things. You figure out the challenge of beating the randomness of the game. One thing I've always appreciated about Blood Bowl is the fact that many of these sports board games that come out these days are really a combat with a ball sitting near you. And you can ignore that ball for the rest of the game and win, scoring points, killing other people. Blood Bowl is about the sport. Yes, you can kill people. Yes, you can foul and try to injure other players. And all of this wacky stuff is happening. But really the goal of the game is to get that ball into the end zone. And I appreciate that too, because it really is about the sport of Blood Bowl, football, Blood Bowl, whatever it is. I like that because there's a game here, there's a tactics game here, and combat is only one piece of a greater thing. So I appreciate that about Blood Bowl. There are some weird things about Blood Bowl that even I don't dig. Things like, okay, for example, if it's the 7th turn of the 8 turns that you get, and you can look at that field and you could be like, all right, I physically don't have enough movement to get the ball to the end zone over the next 2 turns. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to make it happen before the second half starts and the kickoff happens again. Sometimes that's disheartening. Sometimes that's frustrating, and it can happen. That's when you change your strategy. Your strategy becomes, okay, I'm going to knock down everybody and I'm going to kick them until they're dead and they're off the field for good, so that in the second half they're down a player, you know? So there are options for switching your play style up to something a little different, but that is frustrating. It's frustrating when the kickoff happens and the kickoff comes up poorly for you, and one of your players is knocked down immediately, or one of your players is ejected from the game because of something that happened during the kickoff table. Some of that stuff is very random, and it could turn a few people off. But if you're okay with that kind of stuff, hey, it's in there. But sometimes it's frustrating. In this edition, they have added these special cards. Cards that you get a hand of them, and you can play them throughout the game. And let me tell you right off the bat, I don't like them, and I don't want them in this game. I don't think I'm ever going to play with them. They weren't in the core of the original Blood Bowl. They were in an expansion that came along at some point. I don't even remember what that expansion was, but in an expansion, they brought out these cards you could play. There are all sorts of weird things, like you play and there's a phantom ball on the board, and you're not sure if this was the right ball or that's the right ball. You pick up the wrong one, you take it to the end zone, and all of a sudden it disappears. I would really hate if that happened. The game's already random enough, and I'm really trying to work on those odds and trying to make this game work for me without having somebody play some wacky random card in the middle of it. I'm never going to use those cards, and I don't recommend them for the game. Some people might like them. I don't dig them. One thing I definitely love about Blood Bowl that we're not going to see with this initial box set is the fact that all of these different teams that are going to come down the pike. I mean, we already know that the Skaven have been announced as a team that's coming out. We've seen pictures from Essen of the dwarf team, and let me tell you, that dwarf team, I will have it because I'm a dwarf player and I love it. And those miniatures are beautiful. What's great about all these different teams is they all play very differently. Now, I mentioned earlier about how you could get a player killed, and that could happen over and over again. Some teams play to that strategy. Like, for example, the Orcs. The Orcs are always trying to knock you down. They're trying to push you around the field and kill off all your players. And if you're playing a team like the Skaven, they're really fast and they're really agile, but if they get knocked down, boom, they're out. You know, so you have to kind of pick a team that really plays to what type of game you want to play. I like to play the dwarves because the dwarves are so difficult to knock down. They're tanks. They're little tanks running around the board, but they don't move very fast, so it's very difficult to get them down the field. And that's something that we have to look forward to with Blood Bowl, is all of these different teams with all of these different abilities and all of these different combinations of games that we can be playing with our friends. This is really a game where, oh, I'm playing the dwarves, and I'm going to get those dwarves, I'm going to paint those dwarves, I'm going to put together my team, we're going to name all my players, number 3 is Steve, and number 14 is Chris, and stuff like that. And that's what's great about these games, is because they're very personal to you. You personalize these games, this game specifically, you personalize it to yourself, and it becomes valuable to you. And when one of those players dies, it sucks, because number 14, Chris, is now dead and off the field. And that's something that makes this game very special. Now, that's something that we're not going to see right away, because right now we have the starter box with the 2 teams, so it's basically a game in a box. But once you get those expansions coming, things are going to get really cool quickly. And that's when League play is going to start. And League play with Blood Bowl is where it's at, because that's where, when a player dies, he's out. And you have to pay, 1 million gold coins or, 10,000 gold coins or whatever it is to buy a new player to take his place. And you're going to be upgrading your characters with new skills and new abilities. You're going to be getting cheerleaders. You're going to be getting, I don't know, whatever. You got to have ogres on your team. You're going to have goblins and trolls that you can hire on your team. Star players, named players from the Warhammer world that are the best Blood Bowl players around. And you can hire them for your team, and now they're playing for you. There's so much that's going to happen with this game that's exciting. And I can't wait for it. I cannot wait for all of this stuff to happen with Blood Bowl. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and it's back. And it's back in full force, and I love it. Well, all right, that's my review of Blood Bowl 5th edition. Check it out from Games Workshop. If you're looking for any more board game or card game or miniatures game news, check out the Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, our audio show. You can find it at thesecretcabal.com or on iTunes. See you next time.